I was 16 when I decided I'd never forgive them. Not because of some sudden betrayal or a dramatic moment you'd see in a movie. No, it was a slow-burning realization. A collection of glances, whispered words behind closed doors, missed birthdays, silent dinners, and the way my mother's voice always got softer when my stepfather entered the room. I used to think maybe it was just me. Maybe I was too sensitive, too dramatic. But when your existence starts feeling like a burden in your own home, the truth eventually carves itself into your bones. My stepfather came into our lives when I was 9. He wore a suit too often, smiled too wide, and always brought chocolates on Sundays. That's how he fooled my mom. With small, predictable kindness. But I saw what she didn't. The way he watched me when I wasn't looking. The subtle digs. The discipline masked as concern. By the time I was 12, I stopped calling him David and started calling him Sir. It wasn't out of respect. It was survival. By 14, he controlled everything. What I ate, who I talked to, what I wore, and worst of all, what my mother believed. It was always, he's just trying to help you grow. Or, you misunderstood him again, sweetheart. I started to wonder if maybe I was the problem. Until the garage door incident. It was a rainy Saturday. I was standing in the garage, fixing the tire on my old bike. David had been in a mood all morning. He stormed out, slamming doors. I figured I'd stay out of his way. I didn't hear him come in. Just felt the weight of his stare before I turned. He stood at the doorway, arms crossed, lips curled in that condescending smirk. "Why don't you try being useful for once?" he said, casually. "Maybe you'll stop being such a disappointment." I didn't answer. I didn't even flinch. I just kept working on the bike. That's when he stepped forward and slammed the garage door down fast and hard, and the metal caught my fingers before I could move them. Pain shot up my arms so fast I thought I'd black out. I screamed. He didn't react. Just stared at me. When I told my mom later, crying and holding ice to my hand, he told her I'd been horsing around and slammed the door myself. She believed him. That was the night I stopped being a child. I started documenting everything. Quietly. Photos. Audio recordings. Journals. I learned how to hide files on a flash drive that looked like a toy. I kept it under a loose floorboard in my closet. For years, I collected every cruel comment, every moment of emotional warfare. I wasn't sure why at first. Just that one day, I'd need it. At school, I wore a different mask. Polite. Sharp. Distant. I didn't trust anyone. Teachers praised my essays, but called my eyes hollow. Friends came and went. I let them. The only real friend I had was time. And time, as I learned, is very, very patient. By 18, I was accepted into a university across the country. David pretended to celebrate, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. Control was slipping. And he hated it. On the night before I left, he knocked on my bedroom door, stepped in uninvited, and looked around as if trying to memorize what he owned about me. He said, "You'll be back. Kids like you always come back. You don't have what it takes." I smiled for the first time in months. At college, I rebuilt myself. Slowly. Carefully. I studied psychology, but I didn't tell anyone why. I learned about narcissists. Gaslighting. Trauma bonding. Everything I'd lived through had a name. That gave me power. I also learned how to code. Not just websites, but scripts, automations, data tools. I built a private system to organize my archive of David's abuse. Dates, times, categories. It became my obsession. My project. My secret weapon. I graduated top of my class. Got a job in cybersecurity. Moved into a decent apartment. All the while, David's voice lingered in my head. "You don't have what it takes." I smiled every time I paid my own rent. But I wasn't done. I waited 6 more years. I wanted him comfortable, settled, powerful. I wanted the fall to hurt. The first thing I did was follow the money. David had moved into real estate, opened a small but successful firm in our hometown. I posed as a client, used a burner email, and set up a consultation call. He didn't recognize my voice. Why would he? I wasn't the scared kid in the garage anymore. I recorded everything. The smug tone. The fake charm. The moment he bragged about outsourcing paperwork to avoid regulations. That was my first crack in the foundation. Then I found out about her. Not my mom, David's mistress. A young agent in his firm. 23. Barely legal. She posted photos of wine nights and blurred office selfies on a private Instagram. She thought her account was hidden. It wasn't. Nothing is. I waited until their affair hit a peak. Then I sent the files. Not to my mother. Not to the girl. To the IRS. The investigation started slow. A letter. A request for documents. David didn't panic yet. But I knew what was coming. The moment he tried to cover it up, they opened a fraud case. That's when I sent the second package. Anonymous. Printed photos. Audio files. Handwritten letters detailing abuse. Addressed to every board member of his firm. Every major investor. Every potential partner. His silence collapsed in on itself. Clients pulled out. His girlfriend ghosted him. My mother filed for divorce. And I slept like a baby. David didn't go down instantly. Men like him never do. They scramble, spin stories, call in favors. But every step he took only made the fall worse. The fraud investigation started to dig into his real estate dealings. He'd been funneling money through shell companies for years, pretending to pay subcontractors that didn't exist, writing off renovations that were never completed. His arrogance made him sloppy. I didn't have to fabricate anything. I just connected the dots. Quietly. Patiently. Like a shadow behind him, cleaning up the mess he thought no one saw. Within 3 weeks, his firm was under internal audit. He tried to play innocent, throwing junior employees under the bus. But the evidence was too precise. Too surgical. The emails. The voice recordings. The calendar logs. They didn't just point at him, they trapped him. Then came the press. Local headlines. Prominent realtor under investigation for fraud. My mother saw it on the news. She called me that night. Her voice shook. Not with fear, with realization. I should have believed you, she said. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. She already knew. 2 days later, she filed for divorce. She took the house, the car, the pension, everything in her name. She never looked back. But I wasn't finished. There was one more thing he cared about more than money, reputation. His name. His legacy. So I buried it. I submitted an anonymous packet to every real estate board he was affiliated with. Every speaking engagement he ever bragged about. I included screenshots of inappropriate texts with his young employee. Transcripts of calls he thought were private. Testimonies from clients he manipulated. It wasn't rage. It was meticulous. His licenses were suspended. Invitations dried up. His firm collapsed. And when he tried to start a new one, his name was already blacklisted. He tried reaching out to me. First through my mother. Then directly, a blocked number, voicemail full of anger and desperation. You think this makes you better than me, he said. You're sick. You always were. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He was unraveling all on his own. But here's the part that surprised even me. After everything, the takedown, the silence, the victory, I didn't feel joy. Not like I thought I would. I thought revenge would taste like power. Like justice. Like satisfaction. But what it really tasted like was release. I slept easier. Ate slower. Smiled more. Not because he was broken, but because I had finally stopped carrying the weight of what he did. Revenge wasn't about hurting him. Not really. It was about no longer protecting him. He built his own destruction. I just stopped cleaning up the debris. The last I heard, he moved out of state. Tried to start fresh under a different company name. It didn't last. He was too loud, too reckless. People talk. And I made sure the right ones listened. I never needed to see his face again. Because by then, I was free. And freedom, real, honest freedom, doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from knowing you no longer owe anything to the people who broke you. I didn't become like him. I didn't burn everything down. I just took the truth he buried and brought it into the light. That was enough. The silence after destruction is strange. You imagine it'll be satisfying, like fireworks or applause. But when it finally comes, it's just still. No one claps when the villain falls in real life. There's no dramatic music. Just an empty inbox, unanswered calls, and a quiet house that no longer feels haunted. I started walking in the mornings. No headphones. No distractions. Just the sound of gravel under my feet and the cold bite of early light. It was the first time I ever truly listened to myself. At work, I got promoted. People started noticing my calm under pressure, my obsession with patterns. They didn't know why I was so good at spotting digital threats, but I did. I'd spent most of my life learning how to anticipate a storm before anyone else heard thunder. One afternoon, I sat in a conference room with a high-profile client. He was older, sharp, and asked tough questions. At the end of the meeting, he looked at me and said, "You carry something in your eyes. Like you've seen something most people haven't." I just nodded. I didn't tell him that I'd lived in a war zone, one without bombs, but with words that exploded in my chest. One where I smiled through bruises no one could see. One where silence became my only shield. But here's the thing about war. You either become the enemy or you outgrow the battlefield. I chose the second. I bought my first apartment. Small, but mine. No one else's name on the lease. No footsteps in the hallway I didn't recognize. No doorknobs turning without warning. My mother started calling again. Slowly. Cautiously. The conversations weren't deep, but they were real. For the first time, she didn't sound afraid to speak. "I still don't understand how I didn't see it," she said one evening. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to punish her. "Because he made sure you didn't," I said. It wasn't an excuse. Just the truth. She cried. And I let her. Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because I didn't want to carry that anger anymore. It was too heavy. And I had places to go. Sometimes I'd drive past our old neighborhood. The house was still there. Same driveway. Same blue shutters. But someone else lived there now. Kids played in the yard. A new dog barked at passing cars. I didn't feel haunted. Just distant. Like watching a rerun of a show you no longer relate to. David's name popped up once more, months later. A small article in a legal blog. He'd been caught falsifying paperwork again, under a fake business name this time. Charged with attempted fraud. His photo was smaller now. No suit. No smile. Just tired eyes and a history he couldn't outrun. I closed the tab. Not with pride. Not with pity. Just peace. Because I didn't need to see his downfall to know I'd risen. I used to dream about confronting him one day. Telling him everything. Unloading every word I'd swallowed. But now I understand something I didn't before. Revenge isn't about being heard. It's about knowing you've moved so far beyond them. They wouldn't recognize your voice if you screamed in their face. That's real power. That's the part they never teach you in revenge stories. Not the fall. The flight. I used to think closure would come in some final confrontation. A dramatic moment. A reckoning. But closure doesn't knock on your door. It doesn't send a letter. It arrives quietly, like the first morning you wake up and realize you didn't think about them the night before. That moment came for me while washing dishes. There was nothing special about it. Just the hum of the faucet, the clink of a plate, sunlight streaming through the window. And then it hit me, this was my life now. Peaceful. Undisturbed. No footsteps pacing outside my bedroom. No subtle dread rising in my chest. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I finally met myself. Not the scared version of me that learned to stay silent to survive. Not the cold version that spent years calculating revenge. But the real version. The one that was waiting underneath all that armor. I started journaling again. Not to document pain this time, but to explore peace. Pages that once held evidence now held poetry. Dreams. Gratitude. I even wrote letters I never sent. One to David. One to my younger self. To David, I wrote, "You didn't break me. You bent me, bruised me, silenced me, but you didn't end me. I found the version of myself you tried to erase. And I made her stronger." To my younger self. "You were never too much. You were never the problem. You were just a child trying to survive a battlefield no one believed was real. You did well. And I'm proud of you. It was in those letters that I found something better than revenge. I found forgiveness. Not for him. For me. For the years I thought I was weak. For the times I blamed myself. For the pain I carried that was never mine to begin with. And slowly, the story stopped being about him at all. It became about me. About the quiet confidence that builds when you stop explaining yourself. The self-worth that grows when you stop chasing apologies. The healing that begins when you realize you don't need anyone else to validate your pain. I started volunteering. Nothing big, just a youth center that offered mentorship to teens in rough homes. Kids who wore the same guarded look I once did. I didn't tell them everything. Just enough. Just enough to let them know they weren't alone. That someone else had survived the silence, too. One of the boys asked me once, "What do you do when someone ruins your life and doesn't even say sorry?" I looked at him and said, "You rebuild it so beautifully that they never get to enter it again." He nodded. Quietly. Like he finally understood something no one else had ever told him. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a story of revenge. It was a story of recovery. Because revenge fades. But healing lasts. I used to think power was control. Winning. Making someone pay. But now I know. Power is walking away without needing the last word. It's knowing the fire that once consumed you has become your warmth, not your weapon. It's choosing growth over retaliation. Peace over chaos. Truth over pain. I never wanted to be the hero. I just didn't want to be the victim anymore. But somehow, in choosing myself, in choosing healing, I became both. And that was enough. People assume revenge is loud. Explosive. A grand finale with flames and fury. But sometimes, the most powerful revenge is the one no one sees. It's in the quiet moments. The overlooked victories. The way you carry yourself when you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. That's where I found myself. For the first time, I was living without a battle plan. No secret files. No timelines. No whispered war in my head. Just days. Uncomplicated, open, ordinary days. It felt unfamiliar. And terrifying. Because when you spend your life surviving, peace feels suspicious. Like something borrowed you'll have to return. But slowly, it stopped feeling foreign. I started trusting the quiet. I began building things just for me, not as a weapon, not as a shield, but as creation. I picked up photography. Spent hours capturing light on still water, shadows on old brick, the way color changes right before sunset. I wasn't chasing a purpose. I was remembering how to see beauty again. That's what no one tells you about healing. It's not a straight line. It's a spiral. Some days you feel free. Other days, the past taps you on the shoulder and whispers your old name. But you don't answer. Not anymore. David tried to reach out again. This time, through email. He used a fake name, but the language was the same. Passive-aggressive. Manipulative. Coated in a thin layer of concern. I hope you've moved on. Harboring resentment can destroy a person. I didn't respond. He still thought silence was weakness. He never understood that silence was my freedom. That not replying wasn't submission, it was elevation. I was no longer living on his terms. He didn't exist in the world I was building now. And that world was growing. I was offered a senior role at work. I accepted. Not because I needed the validation, but because I was ready to lead from a place of strength, not pain. I moved to a new city. A quieter one. Near water. Mornings were filled with birdsong instead of footsteps. Evenings ended with tea and books, not tension and dread. It was everything I never thought I could have, not because it was extravagant, but because it was safe. Safety, I realized, is the most underrated form of luxury. One afternoon, I met someone. A man with gentle eyes and quiet hands. He didn't pry. He listened. He wasn't loud with promises. He was consistent with presence. And slowly, I let him in. Not because I needed someone to save me, but because I had already saved myself. He once asked me, during a quiet walk along the river, "Do you regret anything?" I thought about it. About the years lost. The scars earned. The path I took to get here. And I said, I regret not leaving sooner. But not what I became because of it. He nodded. Like he understood. Like maybe he had his own ghosts too. That's the thing about survivors, we recognize each other. Not in our pain, but in our peace. Because when you've rebuilt from ashes, you don't look for fireworks. You look for warmth, stability, stillness, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be earned through pain. I never went public with what happened. Never told the full story on a stage or in an article. But I did one day speak at a conference on trauma-informed systems. Just a few hundred people. Professionals. Advocates. Survivors. I didn't name him. I didn't have to. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was about all the people like me who learned to live in silence and forgot they had a voice. Who thought revenge was the only way forward because healing felt too far away. And at the end of my talk, I told them something I'd waited my whole life to understand. You don't have to become what hurt you to be free from it. Sometimes the most radical revenge is becoming someone you're proud to live with. There was a time when I thought everything in life had to be earned through pain. That love had to be proven. That peace had to be bought with suffering. That success only mattered if it made someone else regret underestimating you. But as the years passed, I started seeing things differently. It wasn't the victories that healed me. Not the job title. Not the apartment. Not even the fact that David had lost everything he once used to control us. It was the quiet consistency of a life lived on my own terms. Waking up without fear. Laughing without flinching. Loving without strategy. That's what revenge doesn't prepare you for what happens after the war. When there's no one left to fight but yourself. When silence returns and you realize the world doesn't revolve around pain anymore. I started mentoring full-time. What began as a few hours a week at the youth center turned into something larger. We built a program for kids aging out of the foster system, the ones who felt invisible, disposable. I knew that feeling all too well. They didn't need pity. They needed someone who understood what it's like to grow up in a house where safety wasn't guaranteed, where your voice had an expiration date, where being good was the only way to avoid being punished for existing. I gave them space. Not lectures. Not rules. Just space to tell the truth, without fear of being called dramatic or disrespectful or ungrateful. And the more I helped them find their voices, the more I realized. I'd finally found mine. I wasn't hiding anymore. Not behind control. Not behind silence. Not behind the idea that I had to win to matter. One day, a girl, 15, guarded, sharp, sat across from me in one of our sessions. She asked, "Did it ever go away? The part of you that wants them to hurt like you did?" I looked at her for a long time before answering. And then I said, "No, not completely." But one day, it stopped being the loudest voice in the room. And that was enough. She nodded. Didn't say anything. But I could tell she understood. The wound might never disappear. But it doesn't have to dictate your life. You just learn how to live around it. And eventually, how to live beyond it. Years passed. The scars faded. Not erased, but softened. Every so often, someone would ask me why I never confronted David face to face. Why I never looked him in the eyes and told him what he did. And the truth? Because I didn't need to. I didn't need his acknowledgement to validate my experience. I didn't need his apology to heal. I didn't need him to see me. I saw myself. And that was enough. Revenge may have sparked the fire. But healing built the home. And that home became something I could finally rest inside, without watching the door, without bracing for impact, without pretending I wasn't still bleeding. I had stopped the cycle. I didn't pass the pain forward. I didn't become the next monster in someone else's story. I chose differently. And in doing that, I won something David never could understand. Peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from silence, but the kind that grows from speaking your truth and surviving it. And now, when I look back, I don't see him. I see me. Rising. Building. Choosing. Living. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't make you forget. It just makes remembering safer. Now, when I remember the past, it doesn't come with shaking hands or sleepless nights. It comes like an old photograph, faded at the edges, but still there. A reminder of who I was and how far I've come. Sometimes, I still hear his voice. That condescending tone. The calculated silence. The twisted way he'd make you feel like the villain for reacting to your own mistreatment. But I don't hear it the way I used to. Now it sounds small. That's what distance does. It shrinks what once felt enormous. What once towered over your life becomes a line in your story, not the whole book. I think that's what I want people to understand. That revenge, the kind I took, wasn't about destruction. It was about liberation. I didn't set fire to his world because I wanted to be feared. I simply refused to keep living in the ashes he left behind. It wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. And truth, once revealed, doesn't need rage to be powerful. It just needs to be seen. Would I do it all again? Yes, but not for the reasons people might think. Not because I wanted to watch him fall, but because I needed to climb out from under everything he buried me in. Because I deserved air. I deserved light. And now I live in both. If someone's listening to this, someone who's still holding on to the pain, the anger, the sleepless nights wondering why the people who hurt you never had to pay, I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't have to carry it forever. You don't have to let what they did become your entire personality. You don't have to waste your life waiting for karma to knock on their door. Because the real justice is your freedom. It's the life you build when you stop giving them space in your mind. It's waking up one day and realizing you don't want revenge anymore. You just want peace. And you've earned it. More than they'll ever know. They may never apologize. They may never change. But you? You can choose something better. Because survival is strong. But healing? Healing is heroic. The day I knew I was finally free, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even smile. I just stood at my window, watching the wind move through the trees, and for the first time in my life, I felt still. Not numb. Not guarded. Just present. There were no more files hidden under floorboards. No more fake accounts or secret plans. No more rehearsed conversations in my head that would never happen. Just air. Breath. Life. And in that quiet moment, I realized the story had ended a long time ago. I was just finally ready to close the book. I never needed revenge to fix me. I needed it to release me. But it was healing slow, brutal, honest healing that rebuilt me. And now I live a life so far from the one I escaped, I sometimes forget how close I came to never making it out. There's a version of me that didn't survive. A version that stayed quiet. Stayed small. Became what he wanted, bitter, hollow, afraid of her own power. I think of her sometimes. Not with shame. But with love. Because she held the line long enough for me to get here. And if I could speak to her now, I'd tell her. You were never crazy. You were never weak. You were just drowning in a world that kept pretending the water wasn't rising. But look at you now. You are the storm. And you are the calm after it too. So no, this isn't a story about revenge. It only starts that way. This is a story about reclamation. About choosing to heal in a world that profits off your pain. About breaking the chain, not just for yourself, but for every person who comes after you. Because when you heal, you don't just save yourself. You become proof that survival isn't the end. It's the beginning. You become the kind of person who no longer needs revenge to feel whole. Because peace isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build brick by brick, breath by breath, truth by terrifying truth, until the world that once broke you becomes the foundation of who you've become. And who you are now is untouchable.